Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this discussion forum on the public and private sector's readiness to embrace the Disabilities Act. Before we get into today's proceedings, I'm going to invite Kevin Powell, principal of the Jamaica Stock Exchange eCampus, to bring us a word of prayer.
Let us pray. Dear Lord Jesus, we thank you this morning for your grace and for your mercy. Thank you for your kindness. Thank you for the honor and the privilege to be here this morning. Lord, we are in this very important discussion and public session about embracing the Disabilities Act and implementing the Disabilities Act, Lord Jesus. You see that you have made all people with special gifts and talents, Lord, and everyone is loved by you. And so, Lord, as we embrace this discussion this morning and we talk about the issues important to this community, we pray that your blessings and your wisdom will be imparted today as we spread the message of inclusion and, of course, accessibility among the members of the community, Lord Jesus. We pray that the message will be felt in every nook and cranny of this country, and that those who can do better will do better, and those who need to implement strategies will do so. Lord, we thank you. Help us to have a wonderful day today, an informed session. Touch the panelists, all the speakers who will present, as we ask these and other mercies in your name. Amen.
Thank you, Kevin. Senator Floyd Morris, Director of the Center for Disabilities Studies at the University of the West Indies. Dr. Ruby Brown, Chief Executive Officer of the Management Institute for National Development, Dr. Marlene Street Forrest, Managing Director of the Jamaica Stock Exchange, Dr. Christine Hendricks, Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities, members of the panel, or the members of the panel, Ms. Charmaine Daniels, Chief Executive Officer of Digicel Foundation, Ms. Gloria Goff, Manager of Combined Disabilities Act, specially invited guests in our live audience, ladies and gentlemen online, a very warm welcome to this discussion forum, Public and Private Sector's Readiness to Embrace the Disabilities Act. My name is Georgia Sinclair. I'm the Senior Manager of Leadership Development at the Management Institute for National Development, and I will be your moderator for today's proceedings. The Management Institute for National Development is the Government of Jamaica's public sector management, leadership, and organization development institute. When we were conceptualizing this discussion forum, it was a no-brainer that we needed to partner with the Jamaica Stock Exchange, and in particular, its e-campus. The Disabilities Act came into effect on February 14, 2022, and is a significant milestone and a historic feat in Jamaica's move towards inclusivity. The legislation makes provision to safeguard and enhance the welfare of persons with disabilities across Jamaica. Today, we have with us experts in the field who will engage in a discourse around the subject, the theme of today's discussion. And without further ado, I would like to introduce to you Dr. Marlene Street Forrest, who will bring us opening remarks. Dr. Marlene Street Forrest is the Managing Director of the Jamaica Stock Exchange and Director of both its subsidiaries. Her mandate is to continue the process of developing the JSE Group, and particularly the exchange, in an atmosphere of transparency and fairness, while utilizing appropriate technology in providing the greatest possible efficiencies to the market. It is under her stewardship that the JSE became demutualized and the US-denominated market and the junior market were launched. She also spearheaded the Registrar Division of the Jamaica Central Depository when she served as General Manager for this subsidiary of the JSE. Mrs. Street Forrest attended the University of the West Indies, Mona, where she read for the bachelor's degree in management studies and later gained her master's in business administration at the Barry University in Florida. She has been conferred with a number of honors, including the Order of Distinction in the rank of Commander in recognition of her outstanding leadership in the growth of the Jamaica Stock Exchange. And it was more recently in 2021, she was conferred with the honorary doctoral degree in public policy by the University of the Commonwealth Caribbean for her contribution to nation building. Ladies and gentlemen, help me to welcome Mrs. Marlene Street Forrest.
Moderator, Mrs. Georgia Sinclair, Senior Manager, Leadership Development, and my Senator Floyd Morris, Director, Center for Disability Studies, UII, Dr. Christine Hendricks, Jamaica Council for Persons with Disability, Ms. Charmaine Daniel, Chief Executive Officer, Digicel Foundation, Ms. Gloria Goff, Manager, Combined Disabilities Association, our own Principal Kevin Powell, Principal of the JCE campus, members of the media, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is certainly a pleasure for me to be here this morning because this is really near and dear to my heart, and I think it's really near and dear to the stock exchange. As Mrs. Sinclair indicated, the Jamaica Stock Exchange and the Management Institute of National Development, MIND, we're really pleased to host this important discussion forum where we look at the public and private sector readiness to embrace the Jamaican Disabilities Act, which came into effect February 14, 2020, following the Act's approval in 2014 and the affirmation of the Disabilities Regulation in 2021. It is my privilege to add my special welcome to you and thank you for showing your interest in this act, which the JC and mine deem appropriate to unpack by discussing the provisions that have been made to safeguard and enhance the welfare of persons with disability in Jamaica. For those who are not aware, I just want to speak a little about our relationship with mine. JSC and mine entered an MOU in 2020 to collaborate in assisting to fulfill the relevant learning and development needs of the financial and public sector by providing, among other deliverables, joint courses, programs, and public education forum to keep our market abreast with policies and trends, and to have a conversation, several conversations really, toward meaningful actions by relevant stakeholders. And today, both our organizations have determined that this act, which is within the public domain, is so critical to individuals, to companies, and to our country's development and sustainability that it requires us to delve into its various provisions, and that is towards action. We also know that with so much happening within Jamaica, we hear about all the disturbances, the good and the bad. It may just have escaped the radar of many persons and institutions who should be moving towards compliance or at the very least embracing this act. Our objective today is to get us through the series of presentations and discussions on this important development, which has been long in coming, have us ventilated so more and more we can move towards internalizing and to show our commitment. I'm sure some of you may wonder why we are, as an exchange and mine, even caring about this and having this forum. We believe this matter is a part of the social plank for which attention must be given as it moves the needle towards social responsibility and inclusion, which is good for development of our society and for business. And it is an area which really, when we talk about impact measurement, this really is measurable. We can see companies will be able to see its impact on the bottom line if that is really what they care, even if that is what they care about. So we believe that, this is one area that ought to have our attention. I believe that through understanding what is required, we will have a better grasp of and really close the disability inclusion gap through public and private sector partnerships and leaderships. The Jamaica Stock Exchange is a member of the UN Sustainable Exchanges, and as a member, we embrace the UN Sustainable Development Goals and our own country's ambitious Vision 2020 goal of being the place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business. And we cannot do that without embracing us all. We see the implementation of this act by each member of the public and private sector as a fundamental part of the achievement of our goal, which is enshrining and giving life to the rights of the disabled community. We understand from global statistics that the disability community is the largest minority group worldwide. And while I am not certain of the data in Jamaica, our involvement can have a meaningful impact right here at home. If we appreciate what the act entails, I'm convinced that we will be able to commit to it and place it as an item on our business agenda. If it is not there, it's not going to be discussed, life will not be brought to it. So I think this group, and I'm pleased to see that we have over 106 persons online, this group is the group to bring life to it. At the JSC, as we develop and keep current our awards, because we have awards and events to encourage our listed company, which is a big group, a significant group in Jamaica. And as we encourage them and the members of our broker-dealer community towards best practices in business, as we focus on enhancing our environmental, social, and governance agenda, ESG, this will be an area of continued focus. You will also see that the JSC, through the Jamaica Social Stock Exchange, the JSSE, focuses on the social, and we bring spotlight on the disabled community. And that's part of our ecosystem and our integrated approach to business, because that's what we want to people to see us as, having that integrated approach, not only looking at the bottom line, but all the aspects that will bring us together and to create sustainability. The exchange appreciates the importance of inclusion in strengthening our business community and by extension, the nation in operating at global standards. In fact, the JSSE is currently working with organizations and entities who operate within the disabled community to help build their capacity through the enrollment in our certificate course in social sector management. And this is done through the eCampus. As Ms. Sinclair said, we are hosting through the eCampus, and you could have further information with Principal Powell. As we navigate global business relationships, it is an imperative that we move more than just give thought to the act, that we move towards implementation, and that we represent this in our policies and programs in our own business. As many global companies are now, even when they think of doing business with others, they ask that question. What is in your policy in respect to this sector of our society? And policies must disclose this. They ask about this in relation to inclusion, protection, and or discrimination. So it is imperative that we look at the act, we take into consideration how we make it breathe and have life. This forum, with its experienced and committed panel of presenters, promises to be exciting and informative. So I have no doubt that at the end of today's session, we would have received more insights and tools to further populate our own toolkit and to assist us in shaping our respective organizations in moving forward in our readiness to embrace the provisions of the Act. I'm just going to encourage us that we make this participatory exercise through our questions and our comments and our robust discussions as we learn with each other and from each other. And in closing, I really want to thank those persons who have come on board, who have sponsored this session, Caribbean Assurance Brokers, or main sponsor, NCB Cap Market. And, you know, it is in working together, in realizing the goals and the vision of us all, that we will have better businesses and a better society. So just make the most of today's session as we go through. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Street Forrest. It's now my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Ruby Brown, the CEO, Chief Executive Officer of the Management Institute for National Development, who will also bring us opening remarks. Since joining the MIND team in September 1997, Ruby has served in several strategic leadership positions, including those of Director of Learning, Director of Human Resource Management and Communications, leading to her current role as Chief Executive Officer a position she has held since 2005. The authority and influence of her office as CEO of Mind has led her to serve and advance the interests of the public sector and allied stakeholder groups locally, regionally, and internationally via membership on several local and regional boards, professional networks and associations, and a presenter of works of scholarship and professional practice at a dynamic range of conferences, workshops, and other special forums. Ruby authored the book, Professional Hurt, The Untold Stories, and has been writing and presenting on this phenomenon. Ruby's management and leadership development have been honed over 30 years of work with private and public sector organizations. Certified as a teacher and an associate of the Canadian Institute of Bankers, Ruby holds a BSc degree in Management Studies and Psychology from the University of the West Indies, Mona campus, a Master's in Training and Human Resource Management from the University of Leicester, United Kingdom, and a PhD in Leadership and Change with the Antioch University in the US. Ruby is committed to elevating and empowering the value of human resources and building the human resource capacity of the public sector in pursuit of effecting good governance for the development of Caribbean societies and nations. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Dr. Ruby Brown.
Only if we understand will we care. Only if we care will we help. Only if we help shall we be saved. So said Jane Goodall, an anthropologist. No doubt Goodall's words reminded you, as it did for me, of the thought expressed in the Bible at Proverbs 4 and verse 7, which in part says, wisdom is the most important thing. So acquire wisdom, and with all you acquire, acquire understanding. Wisdom, as we know, means putting knowledge and understanding to work in a way that brings forth good results. And indeed, today's forum provides us with an opportunity to develop wisdom as we stimulate awareness and discourse on an issue of national importance. That is, our readiness to embrace the Disabilities Act. But how so? Well, we do know that knowledge stems from our acquaintance or familiarity with facts gained by observation and experience or by reading and studying. Consequently, knowledge is fundamental to wisdom. But if we do not have the ability to put it to good use, our knowledge would be of little value. And so we need to put understanding with knowledge to make wise decisions, decisions which brings forth good results. And so in the context of our discussion this morning, we are thinking of the results that will give evidence that all sectors are doing their part to safeguard and enhance the welfare of persons with disabilities. As the Government of Jamaica's Public Sector Training Institute, MIND has been mandated to provide leadership development and management training solutions which respond to the needs of the public service and support the priorities of government, such that public officers build and demonstrate capability that sustain a culture of public service excellence. To this end, MIND is committed to partnering and collaborating with all our stakeholders to create and sustain through training an enabling environment, one that develops professionals who are increasingly more engaging, more receptive, more skilled and visionary, more facilitating and guiding, more just, more responsive and resilient, more innovative and inspiring, and ultimately making Jamaica the place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business. The Jamaica Stock Exchange, like mine, has a similar focus on training, and as you heard earlier, through its e-campus. And therefore, the mutuality of our interests and the possibilities for synergy were quickly recognized. And as you heard earlier from Dr. Marlene Street Forrest, we had no difficulty at all giving life to an MOU capturing the public-private partnership between both our institutions. The capacity development that we provide is really not limited to the training room, physical or virtual as it might be, but it has also been through webinars and policy forums such as this one this morning. And in these cases, and as we are doing today, we bring together Jamaica's best. We bring our best to share ideas and technical information with the aim of increasing knowledge and understanding across our stakeholder groups, such that in putting the knowledge and understanding to work, we do so in ways that bring forth good results. We are mindful that the true measure of our success will not be in how many participants engaged in our learner-friendly environment and engage, or for that matter, our engage in facilitating methodology, or for that matter, the number of relevant and timely and quality programs and courses we deliver. But we recognize it will be in the ways in which public and private sector managers, leaders, and organizations respond effectively and efficiently to serve in the best interests of the citizenry and satisfy the citizenry's expectations to be so served, to be served with inclusivity, accountability, integrity, and impartiality, innovation, and service excellence, all of which are values we hold dearly as a public service. And so this morning, as I stand here, I must say that mine as an agency is very pleased to see the virtual and physical turnout, and of course the strategic positions that many of the attendees at this forum hold. Indeed, it communicates to us that we understand and we fully embrace the Disabilities Act, and that we see this as not an option, but a demonstration of wisdom. Well, I'm expecting that a few members of our MIND board is here as well, at least virtually, as are also members of the MIND team. And I'm pleased to say thanks again for your continued support. But to our wider audience, I want to say, please let us stay fully present with the discourse this morning, doing so with a relaxed urgency, a reflective practice. For it is when we reflect that we make connections, and it is in making the connections that we will use the knowledge, buoyed by understanding, to demonstrate the wisdom to underpin the management and leadership that must attend our most critical need to embrace the Disabilities Act. And so, thank you for being here this morning.
Thank you, Ruby. We now move on to the main event, I would say, and we are going to begin with key presentations. We have two components to this morning's discussion forum. We would have two key presentations, one by Dr. Christine Hendricks and the other by Senator Floyd Morris, and then we'll move into a panel discussion where other persons will join us. It's my pleasure to introduce to you our first presenter, Dr. Christine Hendricks, who is currently the interim head for the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities. She's a passionate advocate for the education and empowerment of persons with disabilities. And as I indicated earlier on, she's the interim head of the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities. And this body, a statutory body, was established with the Disabilities Act, which came into effect on February 14, 2022. With extensive local and international experience, Dr. Hendricks has been a vibrant speaker and presenter at workshops and seminars dealing with various aspects of disability. As a member of the community of persons with disabilities, she has lent her considerable experience and expertise to the advisory and management boards on disabilities and the Abilities Foundation as a board member. She has also served on several working groups and committees, including the Task Force on Disability Subsector Plan and the Task Force on Social and Vulnerable Groups, both part of Jamaica's Vision 2030. Ladies and gentlemen, help me to welcome Dr. Christine Hendricks, who will be our first key presenter.
Thank you so very much, Madam Moderator, facilitator of today's session. It's such a pleasure to be here this morning, and let me say greetings to the leadership of MIND and the Jamaica Stock Exchange, along with the leadership of the public and private sector, persons in the disability sector, and of course, wonderful audience that is here this morning and those online. It is such a privilege to be able to share in a way that I'm sure will benefit our country as we seek to move towards development status. And so this morning, as I go into my presentation, I'll be setting the context of the Disabilities Act, presenting briefly the nexus between the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and the Disabilities Act, looking at who we're talking about when we're talking about the Disabilities Act, the objectives of the Act, that is the why, and look at the parts of the Act in terms of the overall overview of the Disabilities Act itself, look at some critical definitions in the Act, provide a synopsis of the regulations, and then I will conclude. The Disabilities Act has a very strong policy and legislative framework, not only nationally but internationally. And so the process for the Disabilities Act started way back in 2000 with the National Policy for Persons with Disabilities. Shortly thereafter, in 2003, the drafting of the Disabilities Bill began, and some persons who are here in the room and online have been part of that process. While that was taking place in 2007, Jamaica signed and ratified the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And this convention is 50 articles with 33 articles addressing the rights of persons with disabilities. While that was taking place, Jamaica also was crafting its long-term Vision 2030 National Development Plan, And as part of that plan was the Disabilities Subsector Plan to provide some guidance as to how this inclusion of persons with disabilities should be taking place. By 2014, the Disabilities Act was passed in the Parliament. And we all know that in 2015, with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, Jamaica also signed on, ensuring that it was also a part of delivering on the 2030 Agenda mantra to leave no one behind. And in February 14, 2022, the effective date for the Disabilities Act came into being. So what is the nexus between the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and the Disabilities Act? As mentioned before, the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities is an international human rights treaty of the United Nations intended to protect the rights and dignity of persons with disabilities. The purpose of the CRPD, I will call it for short, which is akin to the objective of the Disabilities Act, is to ensure or to promote, protect, and ensure the full and equal enjoyment of all human rights and fundamental freedoms by all persons with disabilities, and to promote respect for their inherent dignity. And of course, the purpose of the Disabilities Act is to promote, protect, and ensure the full and equal enjoyment by persons with disabilities of privileges, interests, benefits, and treatment on an equal basis with others, and to establish the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities. So who are we talking about when we're talking about this Disabilities Act? Who are the persons we're seeking to ensure that their fundamental rights and freedoms are upheld? The Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities defines a person with a disability, or outlines a person with a disability, to include persons with long-term physical, mental, intellectual, or sensory impairments, which, in interaction with various barriers, may hinder his full and effective participation in society on an equal basis with others. The Disabilities Act of Jamaica states that a person with a disability includes a person who also has a long-term physical, mental, intellectual, or sensory impairment, which may hinder his full and effective participation in society on an equal basis with other persons. And that's according to the Disabilities Act of 2014. The objects of the Act, why was it necessary to have this Disabilities Act? One, to reinforce and promote recognition and acceptance within Jamaica of the principle that a person with a disability has the same fundamental rights as any other person in Jamaica. Two, to promote individual dignity and autonomy, including the freedom of choice and independence of a person with a disability. Three, to promote respect for difference and acceptance of persons with disabilities as part of human diversity and humanity. Four, to ensure full and effective participation and inclusion in the society for persons with disabilities on an equal basis with others. And five, to prevent or prohibit discrimination against a person with a disability. Now, the Disabilities Act comprises 11 parts. Part 1 is the preliminary section, which includes the interpretation and the objects of the Act, which I just shared. Part 2 speaks to the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities. So it speaks to its establishment as a body corporate to which Section 28 of the Interpretation Act applies and set out its functions. It speaks about the Board of Management, the Codes of Practice, the Confidential Register, and the registration process of persons with disabilities. Part 2, as it speaks to the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities, mandates that the Council, under Section 9, develop codes of practice. And these are done for guidance on matters under the Act, which are practical guidelines for the avoidance of discrimination on the grounds of a person's disability. And so Jamaica, well, so far the council, previous one, has facilitated, along with the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, the crafting of the drafting of 3 codes of practice so far, which will be reviewed and adopted by the body corporate, Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities, laid on the Houses of Parliament, and then will be made available to the public. Code of practice for education and training, code of practice for employment, and the code of practice for public health and health facilities. Now, Part 3 of the Disabilities Act, that's Section 15, deals with the Disabilities Rights Tribunal. It speaks to its establishment, how it deals with complaints, dispute resolution procedures, and alternative measures. The purpose of this tribunal is to hear complaints of aggrieved persons and to settle same. The constitution of the tribunal is set out in the 3rd schedule of the Act. Now, it is important to note that the awards of the Disabilities Rights Tribunal, or the DRT for short, are final and conclusive and can only be challenged on a point of law in the Supreme Court. Part 4 of the Disabilities Act begins to speak to the particular rights of persons with disabilities. And so it speaks to protection from discrimination. And all forms of discrimination are addressed in this section. Part 5 speaks to education and training, the right to education and training. Part 6 speaks to the right to employment. It addresses discrimination against applicants and employees on account of disability. And it speaks to the duty of the employer to make the necessary adjustments in the workplace to facilitate the development of persons with disabilities. And it also speaks to redeployment of employees who may acquire a disability on the job. Part 7 speaks to political office and public life. That is the right of persons with disabilities to participate in political office and public life. Part 8 deals with the right of persons with disabilities to access health care and health facilities. Part 9 speaks to the right to premises and housing. And this section deals with existing and new premises, and it deals also, or it addresses also, alterations to leased premises and also discrimination in relation to premises. Part 10 looks at public passenger vehicles, and Part 11 deals with miscellaneous matters. Now, there are some key terms that are important for one to understand the Disabilities Act. And the first one comes up in Part 1, Section 2 of the Act, which speaks to access. And what does access mean? What does it refer to? So access refers to and includes the following. There are 3 areas. A, premises, the freedom to enter in, approach, communicate with, make use of, or maneuver within any premises. So that's the first meaning of access. Secondly, it means access means benefits, access to benefits, and that is the freedom to make use of any benefits. And C, access also speaks to communication, the capacity to receive and make use of information. Accessible features would include rails, ramps, lifts, lowered tables, signs, wide doorways, etc. Anything that is utilized to enable the independence of persons with disabilities in their daily movements and activities. Accessibility aids includes braille, hearing aids, canes, crutches, wheelchairs, technologies, or any device used to facilitate the independence of persons with disabilities. Communicate in the Disabilities Act means or includes to make use of language, display of text, braille, large print, audio, accessible multimedia, human reader, and other augmentative or alternative modes of communication, oral and oral, that's speaking and hearing communication, and tactile communication and communication technology. We have been speaking about discrimination. The Act speaks to non-discrimination. And what does that mean? Non-discrimination can be recognized, or discrimination can be recognized as any distinction, exclusion, or restriction on the basis of a disability, which has the purpose or effect of impairing or nullifying the recognition, enjoyment, or exercise on an equal basis with others of privileges, legal interests, rights, benefits, and treatments in the political, economic, social, cultural, civil, religious, educational, or any other field, and includes all forms of discrimination, including denial of reasonable arrangements. What are reasonable arrangements? Reasonable arrangements are the necessary and appropriate modification and adjustments, not imposing a disproportionate or undue burden where needed in a particular case to ensure to a person with a disability the enjoyment or exercise on an equal basis with others of privileges, interests, benefits, and treatment, and the facilitation of such privileges, interests, benefits, and treatment by the provision of auxiliary aids and services. And those auxiliary aids and services could include A, any equipment or device that alleviate the effects of a disability being experienced by a person. B, the acquisition or modification of such equipment or devices. C, duly qualified interpreters, technologies, and effective methods of making orally delivered and received materials available to a person with a disability. And D, duly qualified readers, taped audio-visually recorded text, or other effective methods of making visually delivered and received materials available to a person with a disability. And if you're looking on the screen, there are some examples of reasonable arrangements that will take you from anywhere from outside in terms of parking to entering a premises or housing, sign language interpretation, access to a building, and of course access to various equipment within any institution, facility, organization, etc. So the regulations, which were passed in October 2021, sets out as part of or gives the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities the authority to implement or to ensure the implementation of the Disabilities Act. The regulations for the Disabilities Act examines 4 major areas, and it speaks to the registration of persons with disabilities, the provision of the certificate of registration, the operation of the confidential registry, and alterations of premises as it pertains to the lessee and the lessor. In conclusion, the importance of the Disabilities Act cannot be overemphasized if Jamaica is to realize development status. It is therefore critical that persons with disabilities be recognized as citizens of Jamaica, whose participation and inclusion in society will, 1, reduce complete dependence on state resources, 2, build on the human capital required for development, and 3, increase the knowledge base and creativity required for such development. Although the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities acknowledges that full inclusion will be realized progressively, the time is right for the public and private sectors in Jamaica to be guided by this act and determine the part you will play in the advancement of this process. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hendricks. Certainly what you have presented in terms of an overview of the Act looks very extensive and thorough in its content. It is now my pleasure to introduce to you our second presenter this morning, and that is Senator Floyd Morris. It is said that perfection is an unattainable goal, but it is in striving for it which makes us achieve greater levels of excellence. This statement is true and reflective of the life of Floyd Morris. So, Mr. Morris attended the Portmore Primary, and after passing the Common Entrance exam in 1981, he went to St. Mary High. While at St. Mary High, he developed glaucoma in 1983, and this unfortunate illness led to his blindness in 1989. The illness contributed to him graduating from St. Mary High in 1986 without a single academic subject. But, like a true soldier in the army of God, Floyd Morris decided that he had to soldier on. So it was in 1991, after 2 years of trauma and stress, he decided that he was going to reclaim his life. This he did by seeking assistance from the Jamaica Society for the Blind, where he went and received rehabilitation. He learned to read and write Braille. With this, equipped him with the tools to restart his education. He attended Mico Evening College, where he did his O and A-level exams. Having completed 7 subjects within 2 years, Floyd Morris moved on to the University of West Indies to pursue a Bachelor of Arts in Mass Communication. He completed in 1996. He didn't stop there. He went on to pursue his Master's of Philosophy in Government at the same institution, UWI, and he completed in 2001. While at UWI, he received a number of scholarships and awards. He was called to national duties in 1998, where he became the first blind person to be appointed to the Senate, where he distinguished himself and was promoted to Minister of State in 2001. He was reappointed to the Parliament of Jamaica in 2012, where he served as a government senator for 4 years. He was promoted to the President of the Jamaican Senate in 2013. He completed his PhD at the UWI in 2017 and is currently the Director for the Center for Disability Studies at UWI. Ladies and gentlemen, help me to welcome Senator Floyd Morris.
Madam Chairman, members of the management of the Jamaica Stock Market Exchange and MIND, distinguished guests, fellow panelists, fellow presenters, members of the audience, a pleasant good morning to you all. I am very deeply honored to participate in this forum, this seminar today, and I've been asked to speak on the implications of the Disabilities Act on the private and public sector. Let me take this opportunity to welcome all the participants to this special seminar designed to have greater insights on the Disabilities Act 2014 that has been formulated to protect the rights and dignity of persons with disabilities in Jamaica. This legislation was enacted in 2014, having gone through a long process of consultation, starting from 2004, when I was Minister of State in the Ministry of Labor and Social Security. I was extremely committed then, as I am now, to ensuring that persons with disabilities are included and allowed to participate and not discriminated against in the Jamaican society. This legislation will do all of this as more, and as a society, we have to ensure that these goals are realized. The legislation is anchored in the human rights model of disability. Persons with disabilities under this model are viewed as rights holders and are therefore subject to all the fundamental rights and freedoms entrenched in diverse international human rights treaties. The United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities that was signed and ratified by Jamaica in 2007 is the gold standard for this human rights model and is a feature of the Disabilities Act 2014. The object of the Act, as outlined by Dr. Hendricks, but I will repeat for emphasis, the objects of the Act are A, reinforce and promote the recognition and acceptance that Jamaica of the principle that a person with a disability has the same fundamental rights as any other person in Jamaica. B, promote individual dignity and individual autonomy, including the freedom of choice and independence of a person with a disability. C, ensure full and effective participation and inclusion in the society for persons with disabilities on an equal basis with others. D, prevent or prohibit discrimination against a person with a disability, and promote respect for differences and acceptance of persons with disabilities as part of human diversity and humanity. Foundation to the Act are the principles of participation, inclusion, non-discrimination, and equality of opportunities. These can be easily remembered using the acronym PINE, where P is for participation, I is for inclusion, N for non-discrimination, and E is for equality. The Disabilities Act was designed to get persons with disabilities participating in mainstream Jamaican society on an equal basis with others. It recognizes that these are individuals with rights, and their rights and freedoms must be respected by others in the society. The Disabilities Act thus places an obligation on the public and private sector to ensure that persons with disabilities are allowed to participate in society on an equal basis with others. For example, Section 32 of the Act requires that measures be put in place for persons with disabilities to participate effectively in public life and politics. Inclusion is a primordial feature of the Disabilities Act. The Disabilities Act has a distinct view that persons with disabilities should be included in the community and the broader society. Inclusion of persons with disabilities in mainstream society is needed to prevent isolation and alienation. This is why Section 26 of the Act makes provision, for example, for all education and training institutions in Jamaica to include persons with disabilities. Non-discrimination is another indispensable feature of the Disabilities Act. Persons with disabilities have been subjected to major acts of discrimination over the years. The Disabilities Act expressly frowns upon discrimination and requires that the public and private sectors put in place the requisite mechanisms to prevent these diabolic acts. For example, Section 29 of the Act frowns up any form of discrimination against persons with disabilities in employment and requires that measures be put in place to reasonably accommodate employees with disabilities. Equality is extremely important to the Disabilities Act. The Disabilities Act recognizes that as human beings, persons with disabilities are equal and must be treated by others in this context. It therefore requires that the public and private sector to put in place measures to promote equality of opportunity for persons with disabilities in Jamaica. For example, Section 40 of the Act stipulates that the Minister of Public Transport must put in place measures for persons with disabilities to have equal access to public transportation and on an equal basis with others. The Disabilities Act 2014 also has profound implications for accessibility and reasonable accommodation in the public and private sector. Accessibility speaks to how information, public facilities, benefits, and services are provided to persons with disabilities on an equal basis with others in society. Reasonable accommodation means the necessary and appropriate modifications and adjustments, not imposing a disproportionate or undue burden needed in a particular case to ensure to persons with disabilities the enjoyment or exercise on an equal basis with others to the all human rights and fundamental freedoms. Accessibility is related to groups, whereas reasonable accommodation is related to individuals. This means that the duty to provide accessibility, according to international law, is an ex-ante duty. This means that the public and private sector must put in place measures for an individual with a disability to use a place or get a service before this is granted. In other words, once the service is being provided to the open public, persons with disabilities must have access to it on an equal basis with others. Thus, ramps and such other accessibility features must be put in place by public and private sector entities before a person with a disability requests such facility. Conversely, reasonable accommodation is an ex-nunc duty. Remember, I said that accessibility is an ex-ante duty. Reasonable accommodation is an ex-nunc duty. This means that it is enforceable from the moment that a person with a disability needs it in a given context. For example, once a person with disability is employed to a private or public sector entity and makes a request for information, it must be provided in either Braille or sign language or any other such format to the person with disability. In concluding, the Disabilities Act 2014 is a preeminent piece of legislation that has profound implications for the public and private sector. The legislation is applicable to all parties operating in the jurisdiction of Jamaica, and therefore, these institutions must start putting in place measures to facilitate the participation, inclusion, non-discrimination, and equality of opportunities for persons with disabilities. If you disobey, then you will pay. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Floyd Morris. I particularly like that last line. If you disobey, you will pay. Okay, so we are going to move into that segment of today's proceedings in terms of the panel discussion. And as we prepare for that, I'm going to introduce two other members of the panel who will join Dr. Hendricks and Senator Floyd Morris. So joining us on the panel, we would have Charmaine Daniels. She's the Chief Executive Officer of the Digicel Foundation. And we will also have Gloria Goff, who's the Executive Director of the Combined Disabilities Association. I'm going to introduce Charmaine Daniels now, who, as I said, is the Chief Executive Officer of the Digicel Foundation. With over 21 years of experience in the digital communication industry, Charmaine Daniels heads the charitable arm of the Digicel Foundation. Charmaine is charged with developing and forging strategic partnerships aimed at building a more inclusive, enterprising, and caring society. Charmaine brings a wealth of knowledge in strategic planning, networking, and operations, given her experience and extensive background in human resources, sales, and retail. During her tenure at Digicel, Charmaine held several managerial roles, including store operations manager for the group and head of group retail. A Knox College alumna, Charmaine holds a BSc in Business Administration from the University of Florida and multiple professional certifications from Stanford University and Wharton School of Business. Apart from fulfilling her altruistic mission through volunteering with the Digicel Foundation, Charmaine enjoys enriching lives through the involvement at the Transformed Life Church, where she serves on the board. I will now introduce Gloria Goff, who is the Executive Director of the Combined Disabilities Association. Born in Jamaica, Gloria Goff became blind at age 7 due to an accident. She received her primary and secondary education at the Salvation Army School for the Blind, and subsequently worked as a secretary at a prominent auditing firm. Ms. Goff is a certified professional secretary and holds a certificate in public administration, a Bachelor of Science degree with a major in psychology and a minor in international relations, and a master's in human resource development, all from the University of the West Indies. She also has a number of certificates obtained from pursuing several courses such as project writing, monitoring, evaluation, leadership, strategic planning. She has held various posts and responsibilities in the disability movement, both locally and regionally. These include board member, secretary, treasurer, and chairperson of the Combined Disabilities Association, and secretary and chairperson of the Disabled Peoples International North America and Caribbean region. She has represented both organizations at the local, regional, and international levels, participating in various training seminars, conferences, and on negotiation panels. She also has represented the community of people with disabilities in Jamaica on various government-appointed boards, committees, and working groups, including the advisory board of the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities. She's presently employed as the Executive Director of Combined Disabilities Association and occasionally does guest lecturing at the University of the West Indies. Her work in the promotion of the rights and development of persons with disabilities has assisted in a number of landmark achievements by the community of persons with disabilities. She's a firm believer that success is not achieved if you're alone at the top. Ladies and gentlemen, help me to welcome our panelists. Dr. Hendricks, Senator Floyd Morris, Charmaine Daniels, and Gloria Goff.
Mine, and so should you.
I feel so privileged to represent the mind.
For more information, contact us at 876-927-1761-3. Visit our campus at 235A Old Hope Road in Kingston or our website at www.mind.edu.jm.
I choose mind.
I choose mine, and so should you.
I feel so privileged to represent the mind.
For more information, contact us at 876-927-1761-3. Visit our campus at 235A Old Hope Road in Kingston or our website at www.mind.edu.jm.
Okay, we are going to start off the discussion, and the question I have, I'd like to direct to Dr. Hendricks, because as I listened to both key presentations, it was apparent that sensitization and capacity building are going to be quite important in the process. If we are to break the cycle and culture that currently exists in Jamaica. So how prepared is the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities to support businesses and entities in doing this kind of sensitization?
Thank you very much. So the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities, having become a statutory body on February 14, 2022, is in a transitionary phase for the next couple of months, for a year at least, from February 14, alongside the Ministry of Labour and Social Security facilitating the process. And so the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities, the current staff, will continue to work with other partners in the disability sector to facilitate support to the public and private sector in terms of presentations and any guidance that is required to help to prepare themselves to ensure that they adhere to the Disabilities Act and ensure that they do not discriminate. So we have never worked alone, and we will not work alone, because the work belongs to a team of persons or the entire sector, which facilitates varying disability groups, which usually can address specific groups, and there are some that can address all the groups, so that you have the Combined Disabilities Association, Gloria Goff, who is here. Of course, we have Senator Morris up at the University of the West Indies. We have the Jamaican Association on Intellectual Disabilities. We have the associations for persons with autism. We have associations for persons who are blind, persons who are deaf and hard of hearing. So there is a gamut of stakeholders who are ready and waiting to provide guidance and assistance alongside the JCPD.
Thank you for that. And therefore, I would really like to hear as well from the Combined Disabilities Association, how prepared are you to support businesses and entities in doing this kind of sensitization?
Well, good morning, everyone. The Combined Disabilities has always been prepared to support businesses long before the Disability Act came into being. Our role is mainly advocacy, and therefore, in order to advocate properly, people have to be educated as to why we advocate for the things we do. However, in direct relationship to this particular act, Combined Disabilities Association is well prepared. As a matter of fact, we have already started, because the organization from February 15, we were the first, I'm not boasting, but just informing that we began with the Human Resource Management Association of Jamaica, and between ourselves and the JCPD, we went on to the Jamaica Manufacturers and Exporters Association, and we have been doing others. So Combined Disabilities Association is ready to support, provide guidance. We have been called on numerous occasions for advice, things to do with the physical accessibility features and specifications. We're always ready to help. So we are prepared. The only thing is, of course, we know we have to train more persons to be able to provide the kind of services and support and advice that the sector will require. Because, we as a team, we want to expand that team, and we plan to do so that we can serve you better.
Okay, back to you. I'm staying with you, Ms. Goff. In terms of what do you think will be what are the anticipated pushback and challenges among the business community and the public sector entities in implementing the provisions of the Act?
Well, there were some even during the discussion, the debate in Parliament, and I will highlight a few. One, of course, is cost. There is a belief that immediately let's look at employment. You're going to employ a person with a disability. What comes to mind, first of all, is along with the capability or lack of the capability that you might think, is the fact that it's going to cost. It's going to cost technological changes. It's going to cost ergonomic changes. It's going to cost physical infrastructural changes. Oh my, it's going to cost us. So that's one of the pushback. Another pushback is the fact that these rights that these people now have is going to also have implications for how we structure our fancy buildings. No longer can we use a whole lot of spiral stairs and all these things, because if we are going to use that, then we have to think of elevators. And it's going to also mean that whereas we used to have beliefs that we can't employ a person with a disability in a certain job because we don't believe they can, we have to be sure that we can either prove that or give them the opportunity. We can't be as selective as we used to be. There are other issues as to how I rent my house, how I rent my business space. Now I'm going to be asked, I have to widen the bathroom, and I like the way the bathroom was structured. And these are some of the things that are going to be thinking about. The schools, the education system has to change to accommodate us. Well, the truth be told is that these pushbacks are expected sometimes when the changes are to happen. And the Disability Act, we can defend what we're asking for, because the Disability Act does provide some means of advice and time for institutions to implement certain of the requirements. So it's not that it's unreasonable. We talk about reasonable accommodation for persons with disabilities. There is reasonable accommodation for you as well, because there is time, space, and in which you're allowed to do that. And there also the issue of disproportionate and undue burden.
All right. So I'm seeing, based on what you said, also implications for the building code as well. So in spite of these pushback and challenges, business entities and public sector entities will of course have to, implement these provisions. But what sort of penalties and consequences for non-compliance with the legislation will be meted out against organizations that do not comply? And I'm going to direct this to Senator Floyd Morris because that statement he made about those who disobey will pay. All right? So, Senator, what sort of penalties and consequences for non-compliance will the legislation mete out against non-complying entities?
Well, certainly you couldn't have a legislation of this magnitude without penalties being in place, because it would be meaningless if you don't have penalties for violation. So there are provisions in the building code, for example, if there are violations there, and the building code is administered by the Ministry of Local Government through the parish councils, and there are penalties there if the buildings are not installed with the requisite facilities. And certainly if any of the provisions of the Disabilities Act are violated, the Act, take for example, if an officer of the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities is obstructed in executing his or her lawful duties, there are penalties for that, and you can be charged and brought before the court where that is concerned. So there are in fact penalties, and then you're gonna have the Disability Rights Tribunal that will be established to make provisions for persons with disabilities whose rights have been violated, to have their cases heard through that tribunal, but it has to go through a process through the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities after investigation by that body. So there are provisions in place for public and private sector entities to be penalized if they violate the legislation.
Thank you for that, Senator Morris. Is there a timeline, having implemented the Act in February 2022, do private and public sectors have a timeline within which they need to implement the various provisions of the Act?
There is a timeline. I think it's 18 months. 2 years for building, but I think there is a provision for the for what we call progressive realization. That means over time, you're not expected that all the provisions will be in place instantaneously, but over time, based on the cost factor, based on the difficulties that are associated with the adjustments that have to be made over time. What has to be done is that there has to be a reasonable demonstration by the entities that they are making the effort to make the modification. There's a particular company that has a representative at the seat of the table here, that when they were building their nice fancy building that you can see on the waterfront, they made sure that they built with steps, but they also built with ramps. And when you go in the building, there is a nice elevator, which, it tells you at the different floors that you're on, And I think there are braille inscriptions on the elevator as well. Those are the things that we need to have done with new buildings that are being constructed and the modifications for the older buildings to come. And the Act anticipates that that will be done over time.
Thank you very much. So you have segued very nicely for me into the next question, which I was going to direct to Charmaine Daniels. Charmaine, tell us a little bit about what are the best practices occurring at Digicel that demonstrate how you have already begun to prepare.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for having me. Digicel has, well, I've been there 18 years, and when I joined, there were persons with disabilities that were working at Digicel, and it's varying disabilities, so it's not just physical, but you also had intellectual as well. We have changed our hiring practices to where you are now. The ads will let you know that persons with disabilities are encouraged to apply for any jobs that you see posted. And our building, like Senator Floyd would have said, is already enabled for persons with disabilities. No, we don't have everything in place, and I just want to make that very clear. It is a process, and we will continue to perfect our building space to make sure that we're able to serve all disabilities that are there. But ramps definitely is a big one for us, the accessibility in. Once you are in the building, then how you navigate the building is also important to us. Rails in the bathroom, wider openings for the bathroom doorways, the hallways being wide enough for a wheelchair to navigate. All those things are present. What we did find, though, is we were neglecting some major things. And at the foundation, I see Andre sitting here, but we would have had the pleasure of working with Jamaica Sign Language, because it's not just physical, right? It's being able to communicate. Deaf Can, which everyone here would know, we normally have them in the lobby once a month to serve coffee, but we found that we weren't able to communicate with them. And when I say we, I mean Charmaine, I wasn't. And so my team, which is the foundation, we took the decision to try and learn sign language. And that's a big part of what we have to do as a business to continue to evolve, is making sure that our staff, especially our frontline staff, are trained in sign language and able to communicate with customers. And I would say that that is an area that we are going to continue to evolve and work with. But we had a great time with JSL, and I would encourage all companies to really bring them in to do some training with their staff. It was life-changing for me and my team, and I know that your staff would be impacted greatly by what they share and how they teach you. Yes, I saw the sign. So big up to Andre and his team.
Okay. I would imagine when I listen to all of the provisions in the Act, you know, the communication technology, the things such as access to information, they need to have things written in Braille, and so that is quite a costly venture. Do you mind, or would you mind sharing with us, what was the cost to Digicel to be inclusive?
Wow. We are downtown, I want to say, coming up on 10 years. And so I can't tell you the cost of becoming inclusive because I don't know fully the cost of becoming inclusive. But definitely including Braille in communications is something that we are looking at right now. It's not very popular. It's not something that you see or is readily available everywhere. And so we figure in the initial instances it will be costly. Having an interpreter at your events is also something that is very crucial because it's just another way that you're inclusive. The rates vary for that. So I can't really give you a cost, but what I can say to companies is don't be afraid to jump in. You know, you take one step, but what's crucial is including persons with varying disabilities in your process. you will not be able to think of everything. So one of the things that we missed, while our elevators have Braille, it's not audible. So for some persons, they wouldn't know what floor necessarily that they would want to come off at. But then when we included persons that are of that community, the blind community, they told us, don't worry about that, because we can feel as the elevator passes each level. And so it is something we'll still put in, but it's just one way that they're telling us as we include them in the discussion, that you don't have to wait until you have everything in place, but bring them on and let them help you. You just have to start and be willing and open to the process.
Yes. Thank you so much for that, Charmaine. So, Christine, could you share with us what should be the level of inclusion that we would want to see? Do you think there will be an attitude, for instance, of tokenism that is employing persons only at the low levels within the hierarchy of the organization? And if so, what provisions are there in the Act to address this?
Okay, so thank you very much for that question, because it is a real consideration, because that is the experience currently of some persons in some organizations where, having been employed, for example, as a telephone operator, that is where you remain throughout your lifetime. But persons with disabilities have so many skills, abilities, talents, capabilities, educational levels similar to any other person who you would employ. And most times they are more dedicated and committed to the organization than others. I recognize nowadays that young people might stay in employment, which will then cost organizations so much to continually train. But persons with disabilities, having received a job, they tend more often than not to remain, because it is so important to their own independence and to them becoming, or achieving their full potential as, a human being and as a citizen. And so, yes, there are those considerations, but I would say that the Disabilities Act actually speaks to employment, and it speaks to allowing for that development to take place for persons with disabilities as well. So in terms of training or whatever exposure other persons would be allowed to have, persons with disabilities should have access. Recall, the Act speaks to access as access to benefits. So whatever benefits there are, and treatments and privileges and whatever else that would be required for others to move up, be promoted, persons with disabilities should have those opportunities also, so they can move from one level to the next. And the Act does address that. I know that sometimes persons in organizations who are employed and may acquire a disability on the job, because that's another way someone can acquire, have a disability. Having acquired a disability on the job, sometimes the first thought is to retire the person based on medical grounds. However, the Act speaks to redeployment, ensuring that when that happens, there is consideration of where else in the organization can the skill level fit, or how can I retrain to allow this individual to move or to maintain their employment status in the organization and employ and maintain engagement in the economic development of the country and their own economic independence, so that they do not have to depend on the state. It is important that redeployment is considered, retraining, reskilling. We're always upskilling and all sorts of skilling in workplaces, and so persons with disabilities should be part of that, and the Act speaks to it.
Thank you so very much. So, Gloria, your organization has been working with persons with disabilities for quite a while. Can you share with us what are some of the challenges persons with disabilities encounter regarding access to employment and operating within the work environment itself?
The experiences that I will share include persons who have shared it, persons who have participated in research, in studies, and shared their own experiences, good and bad, and including myself. Yes, I'm working in the NGO sector now. I worked in the private sector for over 20 years. So I have those two experiences. I only spent 3 weeks in government because I was sitting in for somebody else. Okay. Not because I was fired. They wanted to keep me. Okay. So the experiences vary. And first of all, I'm going to share the negative ones. And some persons go for interviews, and when they go for interviews, you already know you have failed before you enter the interview room, just by when someone walks out and realizes that you have a disability and they say, oh, you were not who I was expecting, And then when you enter the interview lasts for half an hour, and 20 minutes is how you're going to manage. What caused your disability? Is there hope for you to not be disabled again? Yes, so those are some of, and for persons who, especially those with maybe a little less confidence, they fail the interview because they're overwhelmed with these kind of questions, and because of that, they may not respond appropriately. There are other occasions when the person will apply for a job, the person puts the disability on it, you get a reply that says, thanks for, the usual thing, thanks for your letter, but unfortunately, the position is filled or we're unable to accept. The next issue they have, they might now not state the disability and go for the interview, and you're told that you should have stated your disability. Not necessarily because accommodations needed to be made, but the fact is we don't know the questions to ask now, because it is felt that the same questions as to how you're going to motivate staff and what are the plans you would have in your first 3 months of employment, and questions like those, along with maybe the tests or the activity that you might be asked to do to prove your capability, it is believed that you're not able to cope in those areas. And then somebody might easily tell you, why don't you try? And they list a number of organizations of persons with disabilities, because it is felt that they will be best able to accommodate you, because your productivity level, they will not say this to you, but we have heard it where the issue is the productivity level is going to be a little less, and we are aiming for higher profits, Persons have also expressed the feeling that although they are employed to the company, it's difficult for staff to accept them or to treat them the same way as they would treat everybody else. They either treat you with kid glove, or they talk around you. Help her no, do this fair no. I wonder if she won't go to lunch. It's not, do you want to go to lunch? It's, ask her if she won't go lunch. So you start to feel, so people have different. One of the other challenges I must point out that we hear, especially from persons with intellectual disability or their caregivers or families, is that they are asked to work very hard, but at the end of the week, they are given less pay. And quite a number of them work below the minimum wage. But because they feel that they can't get a job elsewhere, they go for it. So people like those will never get to own a home because they don't earn enough to pay to pay NHT, and they will not have a pension because they don't earn enough to pay the NIS. So these are some of the real challenges we have. On the positive side, however, and those, they are illegal, and some of them are unethical. And the positive side, however, you have employers who, even if they have reservation, because they truly do not understand that they will give you the chance to prove yourself. They will give you that opportunity to prove yourself. And in truth, not all the applications we send out, putting disabilities aside, will qualify us for a job, right? But we prefer to know that we are not given the job based on the fact that we do not truly meet the requirements than to know that the first thing that was not a requirement, you're not given the job because you have a disability.
Thank you. So it's interesting that having spoken about those challenges, I would like to hear, Shamin, because your recruiting efforts have been intentional, what though were some of your challenges encountered towards inclusion of persons with disabilities in your work environment?
So that's a good question. The truth is, at Digicel, we have not experienced that because from the onset we were very deliberate about having inclusion as a big part of our agenda. So in our space, on my team, there's Jenard, and just to show how we do this, we have a power internship that was just launched in June. Every number of years, we launch a power internship, which is offering internships to persons with disabilities. And you'll take them in, they'll be placed in different departments throughout the organization. And they're taught soft skills because there's some of these persons who were not able to go as far as university. So some of their computing skills might be a little weaker. So a part of this internship is training them, one, on soft skills, and two, on just the capabilities of working, say, in the finance department or whichever department they're placed. Right now, they're scattered throughout the organization. And at the end of the internship, an assessment is done by the manager of that department. And if they're recommended for hire, we would hire. Right now, we have 7 persons with disabilities within Digicel Jamaica and group office. And Jenard sits on my team. And I don't think anybody is as hardworking as Jenard. He's in a wheelchair, but he lifts boxes, he does everything. At Digicel, they're really celebrated, and you would not know that he's in a wheelchair unless he wheels his chair out. His mouth is the loudest. He participates in basketball. He's an active member of the Sports and Social Club. He's a ladies' man. You know, he's friends with everyone. Right. You would know him. But it's very important that they're treated as human beings. And there's one thing, I mean, because that's who they are, right? They're just like you and I. And Jenard is very, all of them actually. Jenard is the only male. No, we have one male, one other, Richard. But they're very particular about being treated as if they were just the next person sitting, no special treatment. And so I would say you really don't find it. But what is key is sensitization. And so I would recommend that organizations, even if you don't have the physical structures in place, you start with the sensitization of your existing staff. Because for them, it can be a little offsetting. You know, she mentioned, are you going to invite her to lunch? Sometimes we're just uncomfortable being around them because you were not socialized that way. So it's not with the intention to hurt or exclude. And I think sensitization training is what will help you to get over that barrier. And just include it as part of your HR training for your staff. It's where we're heading. And so it is something that we need, for everyone to just have so that you level the playing field and everyone is comfortable.
Indeed, thanks for that. Yes, Gloria.
Another major challenge that I should have mentioned had to do with thinking of persons with disabilities as a collective. We are individuals with individual personalities, individual capabilities, individual educational capacity. you name it, technical capacity. I am a person who is blind. I know how to use my computer, but if I have a challenge with the computer, I am lost. But I would call a Damian Rose at this Jamaica Society for the Blind who can walk you through a computer like you're walking through a maze with a map to go through it. And he knows, and when he's finished, my problem is solved. I have called organizations with technical people who are not blind. And when I'm finished, I'm further in the maze because they don't even understand the key coordinates that can take you. They understand clicking here and mousing there. You know, so people though, the point I'm trying to make here is that if a person who is blind or deaf works somewhere and they do not do a good job, when they leave, that space will never be filled unless somebody has to convince. No, sir, the deaf people, them do this. The blind people, them do that. So, you know, I can't work with the wheelchair person because he want people to do everything for him. Because there are people, just like in your staff, your regular staff, you have people who are not disabled, but they will sit at the desk and call John and Jane to do everything for them. Get the water, get the this, get the that. So, but if they steal something and they leave, you will employ another person. But if a disabled person steals somebody, me no want no more than two thief, although them disabled. So I'm just making those points to say that we are not a collective. We are a group of persons with disabilities, yes, a section of the society, but we are from different backgrounds and have different capabilities and have different way without. Some of us miserable, some are Christians, some go to parties and dance. You know, we are different, we are people.
Senator Floyd Morris.
Yes, I want to make a point, you see, which is fundamental to understanding the extent of the challenge that we have in terms of implementing the Disabilities Act. Because I have often said that for centuries we have been operating under what we in academia call the medical model and the charity models of disability. So persons with disabilities are seen as objects of charities, and you know, if you have an impairment or that is caused by a disease and it is not curable, then you can't make any meaningful contribution to society. That is the notion of the medical model and the charity model. Now we are operating in a new paradigm, in a new era, where, you know, the global thrust has been towards what we call the social model and the human rights model of disability. And in that regard, the CRPD, the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and legislation in different jurisdictions, the new paradigm for the human rights and the social model approach. Now, when you look at what is required under the new approach, it is embracing the fundamental rights and freedoms of persons with disabilities. And so when you have an established culture where persons with disabilities are seen as charity cases and they must stay at their homes, and these individuals now start to step out boldly to embrace their rights, to go and seek a job, to get an education, and to go on public transportation, then there is a looming conflict. And there has to be, as we started in the conversation, fundamental and serious investment in public education and sensitization for a mind change, a mind shift in terms of how we view and treat persons with disabilities. Everything that we do, we have to now include persons with disabilities. You know, I see people sending me documents, and the easiest and most fancy things these days, Gloria, to do is to take a screenshot of a document and send it to a blind person. Now, when you take a screenshot of a document and send it to me, it is of no use because I can't read it. It comes to me as a picture. And the speech software that I use, JAWS, is not able to read that. So you have to send me a document in either Microsoft Word, or you are going to send me in a PDF format, but in the original text version, because you can also scan a document, you know, and send it to me in PDF. My computer not gonna be able to read that either. So you have to, when you type it, you convert it to PDF. When you type it in Word, convert it to PDF, send it to me. My computer is able to read it either via that format. So those are some of the things that we have to work towards. But there is a responsibility, Gloria, Christine, on our part as persons with disabilities to aid in that sensitization and that transformation. Because we have to help the non-disabled community along the journey, because for centuries they have been operating in a particular mode. And for us to change and bring them with us, we have to assist them and guide them. Sometimes it's difficult, you know, because they see me as a disabled, a blind man on the road, and immediately them grab on by my hand and want to drag me all over the place. They don't know where I'm going, but they want to drag me to somewhere that they believe I am going, and that is not nice. But if you gently ask the person where he or she is going, the person will tell you whether they want the assistance or not, and, you know, we can engage in the process there. But it's a lot of work that has to be done, and the private and public sector has to work with us, and we have to work with them to make sure that Jamaica becomes a more inclusive, participatory, and non-discriminatory society.
Thank you, Senator. And definitely you're quite correct. It does require change in culture, mindset shift. But the passing of the act is certainly a step in the right direction. I want to continue with you, Senator, in terms of this question. What are some of the governance implications or issues and strategic decisions that company directors, CEOs, ministries and departments will have to consider?
Well, you know, there are a number of things that will have to be taken into consideration by companies in terms of governance issues. First and foremost, the companies will have to make sure that they develop a policy framework in their organization as how to relate and treat and deal with persons with disabilities. And they have to adopt the principles of participation, inclusion, and non-discrimination against persons with disabilities in their document. And I tell you, I am aware of the codes of practice to be implemented for prevention of discrimination against persons with disabilities, and it is going to require that organizations have, for example, individuals in their HR departments that have some form of knowledge or understanding on how to relate with persons with disabilities. This is not a requirement of the law, but I would advocate that as far as possible, in both the public and the private sector companies, they have persons with disabilities or individuals who have knowledge of relating to persons with disabilities on their boards to help to shape policy and to help guide in the operations of the organization. It is also going to require public sector and private sector companies to engage in training members of staff in how to relate with persons with disabilities. And, you know, I'm not running a commercial operation, but I am aware that at the University of the West Indies that we have put in place courses. We have 3 academic courses that are there in terms of training and sensitizing students with knowledge and understanding of persons with disabilities, and takes into consideration the Disabilities Act and the Convention on the Rights of Persons with disabilities as well. So you're gonna need the personnel to assist with the day-to-day management of companies, and these individuals, some of them will require certification in terms of knowledge and understanding of persons with disabilities. So there are a number of things that companies in the public and the private sector will have to do in terms of governance to make sure that their entities do not end up discriminating or violating the rights of persons with disabilities.
Thank you for that point of view, Senator Floyd Morris. Gloria, based on your own personal experience that you shared a while ago and the anecdotes of others in terms of recruiting and selection, speak to the HR managers who are here today, those who are online with us. As we seek to embrace the Disabilities Act, what does it mean to be inclusive in our hiring practices? Speak to our HR practitioners.
Hi, HR managers. Yes, I know you're ready and willing to participate in the process of economic empowerment, because we do not have economic empowerment unless we are earning, right? And the Bible says, by the sweat of the brow shalt thou eat bread, right? And we don't want to eat it only off the social safety net. So some of the things you need to look at, first of all, get to know what the Act says. Yes, get to understand the Act, read the section on employment. It might seem a little brief, yes, in terms of what you know what HR is all about, but then you'll have eventually the codes of practice on employment, which I think is very detailed, and it gives you literal step-by-step guidance. So it will be like a manual that you'd have at work. All right, apart from that, what you need to do is, I think Mrs. Daniels mentioned about how they recruit. Recruit with an open mind. Recruit with a non-discriminatory mind, not just the boys from Calabar because I go there or the girls from Wilmers, but also recruit because whether the person has a disability or not, I assume that most people who apply for a job really believe they have the requisite qualification. So if a person applies, there is a big issue as to whether the person should state their disability or not. Some people say stating your disability will allow the HR managers to prepare, because there are certain things that will need to be in place. Some persons with disability are fearful of doing that because they think that's the first way to not invite them for an interview. You invite a person with a disability for an interview, and when they come in, treat them just as you would treat another interviewee. However, for a blind person, do not just say, don't sit over there, or you can stand over there, or go here. And, we still point, when a person is blind. Yeah, we still point over there, right? So you have to be more descriptive when the person comes in. You have to be willing to ask the person if they need assistance. You have to be willing to give the person your arm, depending on the structure of the place. Some people would prefer to be navigated by just verbal instructions. When they enter the interview, first of all, if you're told before that the person has a disability, ask what kind of support the person will bring or the person will need. So if they have assignments to do as part of the recruiting process, it would mean that if the person has to do a written document, and the person is blind, then you would ask if the person is computer literate, and you provide the computer, ask them to bring their own because they would need JAWS software. If the person is deaf and they're coming to the interview, they're going to need sign language support. So what you need to do is find out what kind of support the person is going to need for the interview. The person must not be turned down because they're unable to participate in the activities. Another thing I'm saying to HR managers, there is something that is used a lot in the United States called affirmative action, where sometimes we do it here in Jamaica, we do it for persons who are not disabled too, because you employ some people because they have the hands-on experience. They might not have the educational qualification, but they have the hands-on experience. So if the person is a person with an intellectual capacity, then you can employ the person without giving that person the written assignment that would require them to be qualified, because you give them hands-on things to do to prove that they can do it. These are some of the things you need to look at. The other thing you need to consider, if the person is already before that, you take the person, once you have employed them, you introduce them to the staff, you include them in the orientation process, and you introduce them to the people who they're going to be working around, explaining or having them explain that they have a disability and what would need to be changed, or how they would need to interact with you. There's no rocket science about talking to us, We talk the same language everybody does. When I just started working, certain arguments were spoken, mine is spoiled, Gloria. But maybe Gloria was already spoiled, you never know, right? So, but people will think that they have to talk a different language to you. They don't know what to say. So just talk to us normal. I will not spoil anybody. And so these are some of the things you would have to think about. Ensure that for a deaf person, they're going to need proper lighting, yeah? For a person in a wheelchair, they're going to need space, either to continue in their wheelchair, or they have a choice to sit on a chair, because some of them may prefer that if they can manage it. Bathrooms there's so much. I would take the whole afternoon to tell you. However, as I said before, if the person is already in your employment and the person become disabled, think about how, when that person recovers, if it's for an accident or some illness, how can we include them in the job rather than sending them home? We have somebody working in a particular financial institution right now. He has been promoted to supervisor since becoming almost a quadriplegic, can hardly use his hands, but he's good with the computer, and technology allows us to do a lot more than we used to do before. So we have more information at Combined Disabilities Association, and maybe you can ask her Madge to help you as well. And also, what you need to do is when the codes of practice on employment becomes available, take it as arm yourself with it. Take it as the Bible of employment when it comes to persons with disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gloria, for that comprehensive response. As we come to, yes, Christine.
Yes, I just want to add that companies will find that when you make your space accessible, it ends up being accessible for everybody, not just the persons with disabilities. Everybody benefits. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Christine. This is going to be my final question, and I would like to give all members of the panel an opportunity to respond. I recall Senator Morris responding when I asked what is the timeline, for the implementation of some of the provisions, and he recalled, he indicated like a 2-year, and then, much longer and so. What then are some of the short-term solutions that business entities, public sector organizations can employ as they think about making the long-term adjustments? Maybe you can start with you, Charmaine, and then move along.
So as we said earlier, short term, I would recommend that companies start with the sensitization of the staff that you currently have. Start preparing them for, having persons with varying disabilities working alongside them. Again, you change immediately your hiring practices to be more inclusive in your application process, and just having a variety. It's funny because we see the world a certain way because that's how we have lived in it. And it's not until you talk to someone with a disability or you interact with them that they can show you a whole new world. And let me give you an example. So it was in one of our classes with Andre. He was telling us about a day in the life of someone who is deaf and how they function. And he went through varying examples. Bank, if they go to the bank. Yes, there's online banking, but if you're having an issue and you go to the bank, how do you communicate that to the person standing in front of you? Something as simple as if you go to the doctor, how do you communicate to the doctor what's wrong with you, what you're feeling, unless you are able to afford an interpreter to go along with you? Someone like Jannard, when you take a taxi, you have to pay twice because you have to pay for your wheelchair to be in the trunk. And it just blew my mind because we go through life not understanding the challenges of those around us. And I think those are very practical things that companies can start to educate and sensitize your staff about, because it is those things that will lead to the acceptance in the workspace and just give a different perspective than the one that you are accustomed to. So for me, the number one thing would be start now. Even if you do not have a ramp, you do not have anything else in place, start now with the sensitization of your staff, because this is not going anywhere. And what you're going to find is that as persons with disabilities apply for the jobs and are not considered for the jobs, they now have an institution with some teeth that they can go to that will then start to question you and as an organization on why was this person not considered when they were qualified. So sensitization, start there, and then you can take it from there.
Short term to long term, in addition to the exposure of having persons in the organization that Charmaine spoke about, there's also exposure of the staff to entities that serve persons with disabilities, visiting there, visiting a space, a community, and an organization. I'm thinking of Sir John Golding. I'm thinking of Jamaica Association for the Deaf, Jamaica Society for the Blind, Combined Disabilities Association, Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities. See persons with disabilities at work in their space, see how they operate. I know that at Sir John Golding there are also basketball teams where persons with physical disabilities also play, varying games or participate in varying games. So it is also important to be exposed to that. In addition, the next step would be to look at your policies. How inclusive are your policies? What is it that you are going to, as an organization, determine now that what step, your inclusive policy, ensuring that in terms of not only your hiring practices, but other policies within the organization. How inclusive are those? How do they include persons with disabilities? How is your environment, is your office set up? Is it set up to cause accidents? Is it set up to, allow for persons to move freely around? Is it set up for persons to be able to see? Is the signage, very visible in your organization? Look at your environment and see what is required to ensure that there is access. And the JCPD has an accessibility checklist that it can provide to help organizations to review or audit its own environment. So, yes.
Yes, in terms of what you can do now or later on, there are quite a number of things, and some have been mentioned before. I believe that you should train your staff, especially if you're an agency that is very customer-based, where people have to enter your business places, so that when persons come in, they can feel that they're at home. They're in a place that is really customer friendly. And we've been doing some of that, and it has been paying off. I also believe that the mindset has to change. We have to change how we think about persons with disabilities. The other thing I think public and private sector organizations should do, especially those who offer scholarships and supports for training and education, for doing different programs. You could ensure that if it's even one of those scholarships or two are reserved for persons with disabilities. Reason being that where we are today as persons with disabilities is because of the different awareness and development over the years. In the 18th and 19th century, maybe, persons with disabilities had to beg. That was the only thing, or they only could do certain things. Things are changing now, and persons with disabilities are applying for and gaining training and jobs at different levels and in different areas. So we want to excel as well, but we find it difficult. So if you're in a position to assist somebody with a disability who needs to upgrade themselves educationally, vocationally, whatever, extend a hand, extend a dollar. It's not a begging. It's just to tell you that you are doing it already, but sometimes persons with disabilities do not get the opportunity to get these scholarships. Thank you.
I always say that we have to start the process with a recognition that disability respects absolutely no one. I've always said that you can be able-bodied today and become disabled tomorrow. Disability is just a minute away, especially in a society that is prone to violence. There is a plethora of motor vehicle accidents on the road every year. And we are a society that is very susceptible to developing disabling conditions. And so you have to start with that in your mind, that you can become disabled. Now the question you have to ask yourself, how would you like to be treated if you develop a disability? Would you like to be treated as somebody who is isolated and shut away in a home, and you have no form of economic support or any sort of family support or anything like that? Would you like to be treated as such? Or would you want to be included and allowed to participate in the society like others? And if you adopt that sort of mindset, I tell you, it will go a far way in leading the change, the transition that is needed. We're going to have to do a lot of training in the short term to get members of staff sensitized as to how to relate to persons with disabilities, because a lot of this has to do with understanding how to relate to these individuals. And remember, one of the key things about disability law is the judges will look at the intent of the individuals in terms of what it is they set out to do, where the legislation. Have there been efforts being made to include persons with disabilities? What are some of the things that the company or the entity has been doing to ensure that persons with disabilities are catered to? These are some things that we have to take into consideration over the next couple of years, recognizing that the legislation is subject to progressive realization. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members of the panel, I would like to thank you very much for what has certainly been a rich and robust discussion this morning, where we explored the provisions of the Act, the implications, the myriad of complex issues, the lived experiences of persons living with disabilities. It is imperative, therefore, that we do embrace this act and vigorously make efforts towards inclusivity, being mindful that those who disobey will have to pay. It's copyright. They're saying it's copywritten. Okay, so I now open the floor, right, to those here with us in live audience. So for your questions, and I will also be fielding questions for those online.
One, two. Georgia, if I may, there are quite a few engaging questions and discussions taking place online. I just want to read this one for the members of the audience who are here live. This person, Dion Jennings, is saying, thanks to Mind and the Jamaica Stock Exchange for the valuable investment in partnering with government in facilitating this sensitization and awareness session. Lots of sessions like these have taken place and continues to take place. We want now for both public and private partners to develop a disability inclusion strategy for action plan. And this person also mentioned or gave the suggestion about having a disability champion in place in the organization. But a couple of questions here, and I think these questions could be directed at Dr. Christine Hendrickson and perhaps Senator Morris. What are the current or planned mechanisms for monitoring? Because of course, if it doesn't get monitored and if there's no enforcement, then of course the act will go nowhere. So they want to know, what are some of the current strategies and mechanisms in place to monitor for the compliance of some of these companies?
Okay, thank you very much for that question regarding monitoring. So the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities will have a department for access investigation and compliance. And so there will be investigators who will be not only taking complaints, but they will also go out into the field, into establishments to ensure that there is compliance with the law. So that is the monitoring mechanism that will be in place. Of course, after the investigation, if there is discrimination, persons can be, well, there can be mediation if such is required. There's a process for mediation. And if mediation doesn't work, then there is the Disabilities Rights Tribunal, which is the end of the process. We did hear that they adjudicate and they settle the matters there.
I think Senator wants to chime in.
The board of management for the new JCPD also has a role in terms of monitoring the implementation of the overall Disabilities Act. And so they will be ensuring that it is being implemented. But remember, there is a sister legislation to the Disabilities Act, the Building Act, which carries the building code, and that is being managed or implemented through the parish councils. And the parish councils have their building officers that has to go out to make sure that the blueprint, what is approved for building, for construction, is actually what is being built. So they have a responsibility as well in terms of monitoring from the construction side, the accessibility side of buildings. You know, so, and then there is supposed to be the establishment of an entity from the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities that Jamaica is a signatory to, that is involved in the monitoring of the implementation of the CRPD, of which the legislation forms part of the requirement of the CRPD. So there are a number of mechanisms where if they are in place and individuals are playing their role, then we should see some transformation taking place in the society for persons with disabilities.
Thank you so very much, Senator Morris. Another question, this question I think is appropriate for Charmaine Daniels, and this is a perspective now from non-profit organizations, like foundations. Person is asking, how can non-profit organizations assist those with physical disabilities or physical challenges?
So I would say it depends on the area that foundation is focused on. I think all foundations, all nonprofits should have and should start to look at their policies to implement something around how they will assist and work with this special grouping. But I think it depends really on where you focus. For us, for example, we do a lot of community grants. And we have two main grant types that we do, the Mechamuckle and the Build Jamaica grant. But one of the things, if your application comes in and it shows where you will be employing persons within your community that are disabled, then we are more likely to approve that. And actually that is a requirement sometimes on the grants that we put forward. Because what we realize is your communities, your organizations that operate closest to the grassroots are the organizations that can have the greatest impact on a community. And when we say community, it could be a community of persons or a geographic community. We saw that with DEFCAN and their establishment. And you see that with CHOOPS and some of the other ones, mustard seed, ceramics. So you see where, you know, as you look at how you operate as a not-for-profit, you have to make sure that you have deliberate policies and goals around serving the community of persons with disabilities.
Thank you so very much, Ms. Daniels. Senator Morris, another question, and I think this is an appropriate one. They want to know, someone wants to know, what's the nexus between this legislation and the employment legislation? Have those changes about discrimination and all of that been included in the Employment Act?
Okay, I guess you're talking about the Employment Termination and Redundancy Act and the LRIDA. You know, all of these legislation as is now are applicable to persons with disabilities. However, what we have moved to do is establish specific legislation that requires that persons with disabilities be treated in a particular context in terms of employment. And under the Disabilities Act, issues relating to persons with disabilities and employment would, dependent on the nature of it, would go to the Disability Rights Tribunal, although it is not to say that it cannot go to the Industrial Dispute Tribunal. But, you know, based on the configuration of the legislation, I'm certain that it would be ideal for a person with a disability to utilize the Disability Rights Tribunal. But it is not to say that the person with disabilities wouldn't be covered under the existing LRIDA or the ETRA legislation.
Okay, thank you very much. And Dr. Christine, this is perhaps a question for you. Someone wants to know, is there any funding available to private sector companies to assist with all that is required, the training and the upgrades, as my friend Gloria spoke about, the cost. So somebody wants to know, will the government be assisting, or is there any entity that will be assisting with any funding to private sector companies to do these upgrades which are required? Give the short answer.
Well, in terms of the short-term goals of training and sensitization, usually the organizations of persons with disabilities do that. And should I say we do not charge right now? But we do not. Don't say that, okay. All right, but it should not, well, I believe that every organization should craft its budget with people in mind. And people with disabilities are part of that people population. So let me put it that way. Yes.
All right, well said, well said. And that's it. I'm just going to read a comment. Georgia, I know we're pressed for time, but this person says, what a great session. Let's get ready for action. And I think that's an important part of the discussion.
I would like to ask persons in the audience, anyone here who has a question? Gentleman at the table, just collect the map. There you go.
Thank you very much. Morning. It still is morning. Okay. I'd just like to say thanks to Dr. Hendricks for a comprehensive presentation of the legislation as is, and Senator Morris as well, and all the panelists. I heard you mention, Dr. Hendricks, the code of practice on education, employment, public health, if that's what I heard, that is coming. But I just wanted to ask, to my mind, there needs to be some basic things that must be in place now. I heard Senator Morris on progressive realization and progressive provisions, meaning all of this will happen over time. And I heard Ms. Digital Foundation saying that we don't have it all, but we'll eventually get there. But to my mind, there are some basic things that must be in place. And one of those, I'm thinking, is communication at the least. So I'm hoping that all of these codes of practice have a communication element. But when I walk into a business place now, I think key for persons with disabilities when you talk about access is, one, I must be able to get in there, and two, I must be able to get the service that I come for, which means the persons inside should be able to, at a minimum, understand me and be able to give me the service that I want. So I'm wondering if, for example, interpreters for deaf and hard of hearing people is something at a minimum that this act requires, must be in every place now. So every digital store I go in, will there be somebody at the counter to talk to a deaf person about getting a phone? And I'm just using Digicel because there's a rep here. But for business in general, is that a minimum requirement that we must say, you're not going to have 2 years to do this. This needs to happen now.
Well, the Act speaks to reasonable arrangements and interpreters as part of that reasonable arrangement. And so the encouragement to establishments, organizations, is to, if you can't afford an interpreter at minimum, invest in your staff in terms of training to learn basic sign language. Start, with basic sign language level 1. It is offered by the deaf community, and it is not difficult to invest in that for your staff. So Charmaine mentioned earlier that at least the frontline staff, it is critical that the frontline staff be trained in sign language. And if you start there, then that is a good move. And the thing is that, it is understanding that people with disabilities are part of your customer base. Some people with disabilities have money, and they have money to spend. And you don't want that money. I'm sure that money is not quote unquote disabled. And so if it is that persons with disabilities are also part of the customer base, then it is important that organizations invest in getting all that they need to get, including persons with disabilities.
Okay, we have a question over there. Thank you very much, Dr. Hendricks.
One quick point. Even though I mentioned that fancy term, progressive realization, please understand it is not an excuse for delay. As you have said, there has to be a minimum threshold. You have to start somewhere with the process. It is not to say that you can wait till 2 years' time, or 3 years' time, or 5 years' time before you do something. You have to start doing some things now. All right?
Good morning. Thank you. I want to just take this opportunity to thank the Mine and Stock Exchange for having me. My name is Maxine McIntosh. I am really from the craft sector, but I have a problem, and I think here and now is a place to get it, get some answers. So all my life, I have been in craft, and I'm looking at sustainability. I'm a single mom, I have a 15-year-old daughter that, you know, needs mommy's dependence. And doing craft, I'm not being able to sustain her or myself. I need a change. And this Disability Act, I am very pleased to hear that, you know, the things that, the help that we'll be getting. But how long, if I want a change to be a counselor or something else, you know, how long will the process be for me to get that going, to get some form of help in terms of getting sustainability for myself and my child? Thank you.
So with the act, there is that provision for empowerment. However, persons with disabilities, while the society is preparing itself, persons with disabilities are encouraged to also prepare themselves. So training and education and ensuring that whatever is required for, you know, for us to be qualified to be able to apply for those you know, possible jobs when they come along, we are ready as well. Because we do not want it to be seen or felt that persons with disabilities are sitting down and waiting on a handout. Or we do not want society to begin to think that, you know, because the Disabilities Act is here, then they are going to pity the person with a disability and, all right, give him a little job. No, we want persons with disability to step into the space with their own authority too, and their own dignity and independence. And I know for some we will have to help them up too, you know, in terms of empowering or assisting with the empowerment process of our own persons with disabilities, so that both our community and the society both are ready for each other, so that we move along. However, the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities currently has grants as part of its programs, economic empowerment grants for persons who are business-minded and are able to manage a business to the tune of $150,000 at the largest end, $30,000 at the lowest end, to see how best you can sustain in some way an income and sustain a living for yourself and your family. That's not the end of the road. That could be the beginning for some persons. Some persons have taken that grant and have expanded their businesses and have empowered themselves greatly. Some persons are not able to manage a grant such as that, and so it has to be where persons look at their own selves, their own skill sets, where you are in the process, perhaps sit down and walk through a social worker at the JCPD or at the CDA or at Society for the Blind to see, how do I begin this process? Earlier on, we spoke to the fact that people with disabilities should not be bundled as one. And so every person's journey will begin somewhere different. And so it depends on where your journey is starting and what is required to take you to the next step. So conversations are required. The JCPD is available. Combined Disabilities is available to begin that conversation.
I want to say, for years, myself, Gloria Goff, CDA, JCPD, a number of disability organizations have been advocating for persons with disabilities themselves to prepare for the coming of the Disabilities Act. And I guess one of the challenges that persons with disabilities have faced is that they have had a lot of disappointments in the past. For years, people have said that this is going to happen, this is going to be done, and so there has been a sort of hesitancy in terms of pushing forward. Well, the Disabilities Act is here, and it lays a legislative framework for persons with disabilities to be empowered. It doesn't mean that tomorrow morning you get up, you want a job, you're gonna get it just like that. You have to make sure that you have the requisite training and skill sets. And I am urging members of the community of persons with disabilities to ensure that they push forward now more than ever to get that training and certification, because that is what going to take you from that level of being somebody that is in the what was the skill set you said that you're doing now? In the craft industry, moving up the value chain to something, something different. And I want to make an appeal to the parents and family members out there who have their children with disability locked away in the homes, not wanting to send them to school and to get the children integrated. Let me tell you something. The reason why we fight for this legislation is for the doors to be kicked open so that persons with disabilities can enjoy the benefits of society. So we want to see the children with disabilities in schools. And if you go to the schools and the teachers and the principal, them are telling no nonsense, so them can't get the children in school. JCPD, the new JCPD is there for you to call for reinforcement. And if you can't get the reinforcement from the JCPD, me and Gloria from CDA and the Center for Disability Studies, they back you up to make sure that the children get in schools. Yes? That is what the Disabilities Act is about. Empowering persons with disabilities, not necessarily to give handouts to individuals. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Jennifer Kinglock, and I work with Combined Disabilities Association. And I want to ask Dr. Hendricks a question. I know that there are several young persons with disabilities out there, and I know with the transition there will be employment for persons with disabilities. Is there a percentage set out for persons with disabilities to be employed at the new JCPD?
That's a question for the board. But yes, we have a board member here.
I am being thrown under the bus. Anyhow, the employment of persons with disabilities, as we have said before, should not, well, persons with disabilities should be able to apply for any job for which they are qualified and for which they think they can compete, right? And at the new JCPD, it would be a great, no, I'm looking for a word that I'm not finding, but it would be really an indictment, that's it, on the council. If we have a new organization or even an old organization that represents persons with disabilities and nobody there has with a disability works there, it should be something that should be really, it should be the model. So if the employment advertisements come out, of course persons with disabilities can apply. I don't think I'm saying anything that my chairman would be opposed to, or any other member of the board. The JCPD is an organization for persons with disabilities and of persons with disabilities, because persons with disabilities must work there. If you don't have them employed, how are you going to tell other people that they should employ them?
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we have to wrap it up, but I'm going to allow just one more question before we come to a close.
Adama Ballet Grove, Montego Bay Autism Center. I want to applaud Senator Morris because he represents the parents. The parents are the one who really have to be an advocate for their children. This act is here. We're so excited about it. We're ready for it to be moved in action. But the parents have to see the water and take it and drink it. JCPD is really a forefront for our center, I must say, that they really help our parents in terms of getting them into the educational system, get them the training that they need so they could be able to be employed. So I'm so excited that he touched on the parents, because the parents is the one that really have to get them out there and get them to have access to equality. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been my absolute pleasure being your moderator for this discussion forum. And now my final responsibility is to invite Kevin Powell, principal of the JSE eCampus, to move the vote of thanks. After which, refreshments will be served and you will have an opportunity to continue networking with each other.
Afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. How have you enjoyed this session? Let's give a round of applause, please, if you were blessed and edified by this session. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you. The pleasure is mine to move the vote of thanks this afternoon. And we started today with prayer. And of course, the Lord did show up and the session was really edifying. I want to thank Dr. Marley Street Forrest, who spoke and gave remarks about the importance of the bottom line for businesses especially to take this legislation seriously, because of course an inclusive society is an economically viable society as well. Dr. Ruby Brown, thank you for your remarks about the importance of this knowledge sharing exercise, because of course it is through knowledge that we're going to empower each other to do better. Dr. Christine Hendricks spoke about the codes of practice that will be enforced and implemented in this new legislation. And I hope businesses and corporate entities and public entities were listening to those various parts of the legislation that we need to pay attention to. Senator Floyd Morris, I borrow from your words, sir, that you'll probably have to trademark after today. If you do not obey, you certainly will have to. All right, there you go. And that should be a warning to and a lesson to entities that, listen, compliance is going to be important. And then we had a robust discussion just now about the implementation of the Act, the challenges. And so I want to thank all the other panelists that joined, my very good friend of many, many years, Miss Gloria Goff. It was a tuggle. Give Gloria a hand for me, please. She brought the life to this discussion because, of course, this act is real. And certainly, I want to thank you, Gloria, for coming and contributing the way you did. And, of course, Charmaine Daniels, thank you so very much for sharing the perspectives, the best practices that Digicel Foundation and Digicel as a group have been employing, and you're doing a remarkable job. When we were looking at, please give Digicel a round of applause, because I know they're doing a remarkable job. When the planning committee was looking at and discussing who could we use as an entity for best practice, easily Digicel and the Digicel Foundation came to mind. And so I want to thank you for your contributions. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for our sponsors who have made this event possible. Our main sponsor, NCB Capital Markets. We want to thank you, and certainly we want to also thank the Caribbean Assurance Brokers Limited. A round of applause for them for making their contribution and their sponsorship to this workshop and this discussion possible. The management and the team of the Jamaica Stock Exchange for hosting us, and of course the management of the Management Institute for National Development. Our partnership has started very strong. We love this discussion. It's an important discussion to national development, and we want to embrace and further strengthen our partnership. all of the persons who have contributed, team from marketing, team from the e-campus, team from Mind, I want to thank you so very much for your contribution to the success of this seminar. Ladies and gentlemen, the pleasure is mine to thank you once again, and please stay with us some more. There's refreshments at the back for you to enjoy, and networking possibilities as well, as we forge together to strengthen this relationship and this commitment to build a more inclusive Jamaica. Ladies and gentlemen, we want to thank you and say all the very best for the rest of the day. Bye-bye.
I was currently in the investment area, and I needed something to complement, what I'd previously learned in university. Something that was a little bit more applicable to the sector. In looking around and not necessarily being able to fund a $2 or $3 million master's, I came across the eCampus program. It seemed pretty interesting. The courses were very relevant to what I was doing. The cost, of course, was splendid compared to, majority of the programs out there.
As a mom, the online aspect of it was very intriguing to me because we could be just about anywhere for our classes in the evening. So even as we went on, team members we met up at various hotspots in Kingston and had our class sessions there.
It was one of those courses that intimidated me when I started. I grew to appreciate it as the course progressed. This course, the postgraduate diploma, has been instrumental in my getting this position here at the stock exchange.
While being at the real estate board as a strategist, I recognized that I really wanted to improve my ability to plan strategically for the organization. And I did the course, and for the first time in my life, I felt I personally could now create wealth.
eCampus itself is structured in a way that although it is within the financial sector, it is open to all persons who have an interest in the financial sector.
I was currently in the investment area, and I needed something to complement, what I'd previously learned in university. Something that was a little bit more applicable to the sector. In looking around and not necessarily being able to fund a $2 or $3 million master's, I came across the eCampus program. It seemed pretty interesting. The courses were very relevant to what I was doing. The cost, of course, was splendid compared to,
You don't have a cent. I feel it. Safe in the street, no. Say some don't keep. I want to see it in here for love. Rock and them say, yes, I hope this is nothing. We are feeling from in Dixieland and Rose. Yes, I hope this is nothing. Oh, God, yeah. Oh, say yes, I hope this is nothing. We are feeling from in Dixieland and Rose. I hope this is nothing. As a man, I know I should walk away and feel nothing to be mine, but I can't. No, I can't. No, I can't. Hush. Family! Always so good to be here, sharing a moment of reggae with a family. Yeah. Yeah. Hush down, hush down. I'd like to repay you for damages done. I know I won't be able to repair it all. I lost out. Every all the time. I used to hurry. Oh, you're still so fine. And it's blowing my mind. As a man, I know I should walk away and leave nothing to be mine. But I can't. Every time I think of saying goodnight, everything inside me says it's a lie. So you know I can't. No, I can't. No, I can't. Try, but I can't. No matter what I do now, you know I can't. Like to repay you for damages done. Say that what I know, nothing you can do to stop a man from trying. Yes, I wanna know, oh yeah, I wanna know now. What can you do to stop a man from trying? Paris wanna know, oh yes, I wanna know now. Nothing you can do to stop a man from trying. Who is the girl? Nor the wind that we grow smile, and the sexy dress you wear. It's totally impossible for a man and I is not to stand. There is no reason to be so uptight. Now you got everything okay. Right now you should know you ready men's fantasy. Tell me what can you do to stop a man from trying? I wanna know Barcelona, wanna do that. Nothing you can do to stop a man from trying. I'm what can you do to stop a man from trying? Say that wanna know, oh yes I wanna know that. Nothing you can do to stop a man from trying. Oh. I see you will come, I know that you will come, yes. Now Jack is a man and he comes around every Monday, on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, every day of the week, yeah. And even though I try to tell you that I love you from the bottom of my heart, you had no place for me. All vanity, yes. If you ever wanna dance, sweet life, cause you don't feel the good in me. When the heart's not good, what the baby say, and you sweet life, cause you don't feel the good in me. When the heart's not good, what the baby say, and you long it's been. Sure as stretch time. Don't ask me how I'm doing. I can't say I'm doing fine. My world is starting to turn. Everything's upside down. It's no use explaining. Got to go see what's going on. Go right now. Come be ready. You better come back. Say you did for me. I did for you. I do it to you. I give to me. I give to you. Give it to you. This is no disrespect. No disrespect, man. This is no disrespect, but could you step aside? No, I never had no one to step over. Cause you won't go like that. Now it's not the music. Why don't you step aside?
I choose mind.
I choose mine, and so should you.
I feel so privileged to represent the mind.
For more information, contact us at 876-927-1761-3. Visit our campus at 235A Old Hope Road in Kingston or our website at www.mind.edu.jm.
I was currently in the investment area, and I needed something to complement, what I'd previously learned in university. Something that was a little bit more applicable to the sector. In looking around and not necessarily being able to fund a $2 or $3 million master's, I came across the eCampus program. It seemed pretty interesting. The courses were very relevant to what I was doing. The cost, of course, was splendid compared to, majority of the programs out there.
As a mom, the online aspect of it was very intriguing to me because we could be just about anywhere for our classes in the evening. So even as we went on, team members we met up at various hotspots in Kingston and had our class sessions there.
It was one of those courses that intimidated me when I started. I grew to appreciate it as the course progressed. This course, the postgraduate diploma, has been instrumental in my getting this position here at the stock exchange.
While being at the real estate board as a strategist, I recognized that I really wanted to improve my ability to plan strategically for the organization. And I did the course, and for the first time in my life, I felt I personally could now create wealth.
eCampus itself is structured in a way that although it is within the financial sector, it is open to all persons who have an interest in the financial sector or just have an interest in doing well in their business.
If you are a broker or an advisor, if you're thinking of doing the CFA, this is definitely a course that you want to do.
Give it a shot. The way that Stock Exchange has structured their program, it's hard for you not to learn and take out the information that they're bringing across.
We invite you to come and enjoy the experience with us, where you can study anytime, any place, anywhere.
My decision to attend mine was the best decision I could have made as a young public sector worker. I encourage every public sector worker to seek out mine, look at their programs, select something. There is something there for you.
For more information, contact us at 876-927-1761-3. Visit our campus at 235A Old Hope Road in Kingston or our website at www.mind.edu.jm.
My decision to attend mine was the best decision I could have made as a young public sector worker. I encourage every public sector worker to seek out mine, look at their programs, select something. There is something there for you.
For more information, contact us at 876-927-1761-3. Visit our campus at 235A Old Hope Road in Kingston or our website at www.mind.edu.jm.
Established in 1994 as the premier government training institution and later as an executive agency of the government, the Management Institute for National Development, MIND, stands tall as a crucial driver to the transformation and modernization of the public sector in Jamaica and the wider Caribbean.
MIND is really the outgrowth of a combination of public sector entities. And the individuals who were very crucial in the formation of MIND and bringing the various entities together were Dr. Garnet Brown and Dr. Carlton Davis.
MIND continues to add to national development by providing the Jamaican public sector with quality leadership development options, management training, supporting services, and outreach that sustain a culture of enterprise, efficiency, and responsiveness to the publics they serve.
Training and development is really the heart of public sector transformation, and so we saw the need to bring a more coordinated and structured approach to how it is that we facilitated learning and development across our public service and how we would want to see that supporting public sector transformation now and in the years ahead. And so, working with key stakeholders across the public service, we created the public sector learning framework. As a country, we want to be dynamic, and being dynamic means that we are going to have to keep in step with all the changes around us, and we need our public sector to be constantly developed so that we can transform as a public sector to be responsive to the needs of our citizens and to a developing economy and towards developed country status as well.
Registered with the University Council of Jamaica UCJ as a tertiary level institution, the programs and courses at MIND are offered at the certificate, diploma, associate of science degree, and postgraduate diploma levels. Yes! Over 50 individual offerings of programmed courses run throughout the year, utilizing the face-to-face and/or online delivery modality, in addition to those learning interventions that are facilitated in a customized format.
Here at MIND, we use a competency-based education and training philosophy. What that simply means is that our participants, having completed a program here at MIND, they're able to go back to their organizations immediately to transfer that learning. We have 3 product lines: scheduled programs, where we deliver over 50 programs and courses on an annual basis, and that is presented to the public through a schedule of learning products, and so they'll look to see what are the product offerings and they can access those programs and courses. However, you have some of our clients who want something done specific to them, so we design, develop, and deliver those programs under our customized brand. We also have our consultancy arm of the business, and with that we respond to terms of references that will be advertised by our public sector stakeholders in the newspaper or on the online portal, or some of them will contract us directly.
MIND is pleased to introduce its newest product line, MindReach, which is aimed at empowering unreached and underserved stakeholders. Through this medium, MIND is able to connect with its local communities through various developmental and transformational projects. The institution's partners include Caribbean Leadership Project CLP, Center for Creative Leadership CCL, National College for Educational Leadership NCEL, Cave Hill School of Business and Management, Jamaica Civil Service Association JCSA, Strategic Human Resource Management Division in the Ministry of Finance and Public Service SHRMD, and ministries, departments, and agencies of government.
The time that I spent at MIND and the subjects that I was exposed to, I mean, they have tremendously helped me in carrying out my work. I am considered a good leader in the JSF, or an outstanding leader, and it is as a result of my exposure to this training at MIND.
Having joined the Jamaica Fire Brigade in 1995, having understanding of my job, I realized that I would want to be a supervisor very soon. So I went seeking a course that I could do just to elevate myself. I went over to the MIND office in Mandeville, and the greeting and the welcome from the staff there was very encouraging. They gave me an entire manual to go through to see what I needed to do. My decision to attend MIND was the best decision I could have made as a young public sector worker. I encourage every public sector worker to seek out MIND, look at their programs, select something. There is something there for you.
MIND has solidified its mark as a center for excellence and continues to facilitate capacity building for national development and the continued transformation of the Jamaican public sector.
I choose MIND.
I choose MIND, and so should you.
I feel so privileged to represent the MIND.
For more information, contact us at 876-927-1761-3. Visit our campus at 235A Old Hope Road in Kingston, or our website at www.mind.edu.jm.
Established in 1994 as the premier government training institution and later as an executive agency of the government, the Management Institute for National Development, MIND, stands tall as a crucial driver to the transformation and modernization of the public sector in Jamaica and the wider Caribbean.
MIND is really the outgrowth of a combination of public sector entities, and the individuals who were very crucial in the formation of MIND and bringing the various entities together were Dr. Garnet Brown and Dr. Carlton Davis.
MIND continues to add to national development by providing the Jamaican public sector with quality leadership development options, management training, supporting services, and outreach that sustain a culture of enterprise, efficiency, and responsiveness to the publics they serve.
Training and development is really the heart of public sector transformation, and so we saw the